Jennifer Crane is on the line. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Aaron.
I referred to you earlier as Jennifer Dale, who's a famous Canadian actress. I don't know how that happened. I apologize.
That's it.
I thought we'd start with this whole Trudeau Colbert. We're going to be playing some of this at about 5:30. Did you catch the whole thing last night?
I caught it this morning.
Okay, and what did you think?
Well, I think that the format is excellent for the Prime Minister because he can really show his best. I noted that he has been working on practicing the way he speaks. He wasn't breathy, and sometimes as he is, he was able to show his sense of humor, which is great. He was able to go back and forth with Colbert, which is excellent. And he sidestepped some, I wouldn't say there were traps that were laid out for him where he could have gone low. He didn't. So he didn't go after the dog cat thing. He didn't go after the Canada's Trump thing. And most importantly, for what he needs to achieve is that he didn't provide any ammo for conservative attack ads.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you said. I mean, I was never expecting, I mentioned this earlier, I heard some of the pundits yesterday suggest, well, he better be ready because, of course, Stephen Colbert really going to go after him. And, of course, it was nothing like that. And I don't think anyone who believed it was just doesn't have an idea who Stephen Colbert is. He welcomes people all the time, different heads of state, et cetera, and he's always very, very gracious to them. He was the same way last night. And I think Justin Trudeau did a pretty good job. What do you? I mean, you agree with that for the most part, right?
I do agree with it for the most part. I mean, and I wasn't one of those people. I would be concerned of a leader going on Tout le monde en parle. That is
exactly, yeah.
No, and I think a lot of people, well, it's not in Canada, but a lot of Canadians watch it. He managed to really do a good job in making Canada look good. I loved his line about it not being a land of unicorns. It was funny. There were a lot of laugh out loud moments where you're not laughing at him, you're laughing with him. And I think, for the Prime Minister, it must have been nice to get all that applause, and he got a lot of love from the crowd. So,
yeah.
I think he'll be coming back to Canada after the UN meeting feeling with a little bit of wind in his sails.
Okay, let's move on from that and talk about the other person who didn't get named last night, he who shall remain nameless, Pierre Poilievre. So again, non-confidence motion brought up today. I know they're voting tomorrow, but we already know that this is going to turn into nothing yet again.
Well, we knew that last week, but they did it anyway. But what it is, it's a parliamentary tool that the leader of the opposition has at his disposal to try to cause a non-confident thing. It provided him with an opportunity to give a 20-minute speech to kind of roll out what we can see as the beginning of the campaign style narrative. The only thing that he needs to be careful though, because he's got another opportunity to do this next week, that it doesn't become a stunt because he doesn't have a lot of content. I agree with what Jim said earlier today, and one of the things that he needs to be careful with is in Quebec. So the Quebecers, French Quebecers, ils n'aiment pas des chicanes. So little fightings and name calling and stuff like that we're very thin very quickly with French Quebecers. So, he needs to be careful that not to turn Parliament into a stunt. And it's this type of thing can get risky in that. It's a slippery slope.
But to that point, that risk that he runs, speaking of Pierre Poilievre, there are still going to be many opportunities between now and Christmas, I guess, for him to do this again. Do you expect, given, the personality you're dealing with here, you don't expect him to back off, do you?
No, absolutely not. He hasn't backed off. Even when he was a government in the Harper government, I remember in 2008 there was this in and out scandal, and he was behaving like an opposition MP in question period. I mean, look at what happened last week. I mean, it was completely irregular, questioning Singh and Blanchette, but he did it anyway. I mean, he's got to be careful that he doesn't violate rules of parliamentary procedure in what he's trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, except it seems to me Greg Fergus, of course, who's the speaker, was just kind of, and I know Tom McCare has said this as well, but if you look at the video, it's not hard to agree with him, basically sat there and let all this happen without doing anything. And I guess since then, he's heard from people that you should have done something, where were you? So maybe he's not going to be able to get away with it anymore.
Well, I hope not, because I think Canadians deserve better. And, everybody likes a political show, but nobody likes a spectacle. And it's becoming a spectacle. Yeah. And I think our institutions deserve more respect.
Let me go on to talk about the Northvolt story. Interesting development today after we found out that it looks like the Quebec government is going to be asked to kick in another $300 million. This comes in the wake of a story earlier in the week that Northvolt is laying off a quarter of its workforce, 1,600 people at its home plant in Sweden. Look, a lot of people are concerned. Obviously, every opposition party is concerned because they're the ones who wanted an emergency debate on this. It's not going to happen, though, right? It came up today in the National Assembly, and it just simply gives the CAQ an opportunity to keep walking and not reveal a whole lot of details.
Well, it does, and it was a really great piece of journalism, yet again, by the Journal de Montréal. They do that really, really well, uncovering stuff like that. And basically, what they've reported is now we're over $1 billion with the Quebec government and Northvolt. And some of them is interesting. So the repayable loan is less than the forgivable loan, which I thought was kind of interesting. But there were two motions. So we were talking about the other story, parliamentary tools. There are also parliamentary tools that can be used in the Quebec case, and so an emergency motion would be one of them. So there were two motions that were blocked today by Nathalie Roy, who's the speaker. And she's normally a good speaker, but they have such a super majority. I think the speakers, they do the cat's bidding. And so the PQ motion for the emergency debate on Northvolt was blocked. And then Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, his motion was basically asking that the government give no more money to Northvolt until we know a little bit more about this. That was also blocked. So the discussion that should have been had or could have been had was not had.
Does that end this? I mean, it's like Francois Legault's thumbing his nose at the opposition by saying, I don't have to disclose this when there are hundreds of millions of dollars at stake.
Well, I don't know. I mentioned to Dean it's been a quiet political week so far compared to last week, but the premier is increasingly seeming to lose the thread. So it's not going to go away. This is our money. It's so big. I mean, if it puts the whole Fitzgibbon resignation in a new light, and it's he can change the channel by trying to insist that the PQ, and I mean he's actually given the PQ way too much power in the past week by telling them to help the government topple and whatever. He needs to play this in a very, very smart way because he came in this as a business leader. As a business premier, and the Quebec Inc. ministers were supposed to be all that, and it's supposed to sort out things for the good of all Quebecers and for our economy. And it seems to me that this deal is kind of stinky.
Yeah, I wonder too. That whole issue, pardon me, last week of calling on Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon to call on Yves-François Blanchet to vote, that was so uncharacteristic. And I wonder, when you're starting to feel the pressure, these are the sorts of things you will end up doing, and then look back and go, perhaps I shouldn't have done that.
Well, exactly. And, it's to a point where there was something else that Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois brought up today, and he's basically accusing the premier of being the chief volunteer for the Conservative Party. He's reposting Conservative staffer tweets. In fairness, the staffer used to work for him until recently, but it doesn't matter. I mean, he shouldn't be involving himself in the federal system as much as he is, because we know if the federal government even looks in the direction of Quebec, he's screaming about jurisdiction and stuff like that. It's kind of unseemly the way he's behaving, to be honest.
Kind of hard to argue against that. Jennifer, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
You bet.